There's a popular mythical, maybe not mythical story, but you've heard it. It's the Battle of Troy, one of the coolest stories in all of human history, right? If you're not familiar with it, let me just break it down for you. Okay, the Greeks loaded all their armies up and sailed to Troy, ancient Troy. And Troy, whoa, what a city-state, right? The walls were huge, and the army was trained so well, and they were fighting this daily battle outside the walls of Troy, and the Greeks trying to take over Troy. After days and days of battle, the Greeks realized that they were not going to overtake Troy, that they just weren't going to be able to. The walls were too high. They were just fighting a losing war. So what did they do? They made a Trojan horse, which is a big wooden, compartment really, but it was supposed to be a symbol that said, we lose, you win, right? And here's our token of, surrender. And so they built this Trojan horse, and they left it, and they loaded up all of their men on all of their ships, and they left. And Troy saw this, and they're like, victory, we won the battle. And so they immediately, roll this horse inside the city walls and begin to celebrate. What they didn't know is that the ships of Greece didn't actually leave. They were waiting because there was some men inside the Trojan horse who come out while everyone's sleeping because they partied a little hard and were very excited. While everyone's sleeping, they go and open the gates as the ships come back and they overtake Troy. What's interesting is Troy thought they won. All the external signs showed they were going to win this battle. The ships were leaving. Here's the, surrender gift. And then what do? They bring something inside the walls. And now, this idea of a Trojan horse has been adopted here in the 21st century. I mean, all of you have a phone or a computer that just sits somewhere in your house. It looks really good on the outside, right? And you don't even know why you still keep it because something internally, maybe a Trojan horse, maybe some other kind of thing has compromised it. You've had some kind of experience with this. Let me just define for you what CrowdStrike.com says a Trojan horse is, at least how we think about it modernly. A Trojan horse is a type of malware that, and this is important, that disguises itself as legitimate code or software. So it gets into the hardware, but it looks legit. Once inside the network, attackers are able to carry out any action that a legitimate user could perform, such as exporting files, modifying data, deleting files, or otherwise altering the contents of the device. What a sneaky sort of way to win a battle, right? And this happens and perpetuates in many ways, but there's something I want to talk about today that is sort of like that, is a pervasive and extremely dangerous problem. Now, you have to know this. All of us are at risk for this problem. Actually, you don't even have to be a Christian or a follower of Jesus for this to be a problem to get into your internal systems. Like, this can happen to anybody, but most especially a problem if you call yourself a Jesus follower. All of us are at risk of being disillusioned or duped by something infiltrating our system that could potentially harm us and others around us. Now, this was the problem that we're going to talk about today. This was the problem that Jesus encountered in first century Judaism. This was the problem that Jesus was crucified for because he called it out. This was the problem that was a part of the problem, and probably maybe the problem for ancient Israelites in all Old Testament history over and over again. This is the problem. And it becomes the problem of early Christianity. It seems to find its way into everything. And it continues to be the problem in modern American Christianity. And all of us are at risk. And I'm so concerned, seriously, I'm so concerned that if we don't address this, if we let it be undetected, which it often is, we just kind of let it go, or honestly, we don't even notice it in ourselves. If we just kind of let it go, there's going to be an astronomical cost. And so we can't do that. Because on top of that, and maybe most interesting to you is, if this problem persists, not only does it cause problems kind of externally for Christianity, but it also creates distance between you and God, between me and God. Last week we started a series called At a Distance, and so here's what we're doing. Each week, we're going to talk about one thing. We're not going to hit everything that creates distance between us and God, but we're going to talk about one thing today that creates distance between ourselves and God. And so throughout this entire series, we've been looking at this, and we're going to continue to look at this, and we're going to ask the question, if we wanted to, how do we eliminate that distance? How do we get close to God again? Last week, we told the story of the prodigal son or the lost son, a very familiar story that Jesus tells. Now, here's how it goes if you're not familiar with it or you missed last week. A son, he has another brother, but the younger son goes to his father and says, hey, give me half of what you owe me for my inheritance. I want it now. And so the father obliges, and what does the son do? The son gathers everything he has. He goes off to a distant country, and he begins to squander everything. And the text tells us he has wild living, and he just wastes everything that his father has given him. He makes bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. And then finally he comes to his senses and he goes, I'm in a bad spot because of my decisions. I should probably go back to the father, apologize, make it right, try to figure out how I can make something of the mess that I've made with my life. And the father, as we read, what does the father do? The father welcomes the younger son back in a much different way than we expect. But all the while we learned, as we followed them, we learned that distance is created by decisions. And that was the story of the prodigal son. And it turned around when he decided to head back towards the father. We learned that we remove distance, one decision at a time, over time, when we're armed with humility and clarity and a correct picture of a compassionate, graceful, forgiving, loving father. Now, wasn't that so easy to spot the distance in the younger son? Like, all of us could look on and go, well, obviously he's distant from the father, right? Like, look at his poor decisions. So obvious. The thing about what we're going to talk about today is we're going to look at the older son for a few minutes. And I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, the older son himself is distant. The difference is, it's hard to detect. The difference is, it's not obvious. Let's read. Turn to Luke chapter 15, verse 25. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So the father went out and pleaded with him, but he answered his father, look, all of these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son, not even my brother, when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? And then the father, you just got listen to the father, right? My son, the father said, you're always with me, and everything I have, it's yours. But listen, we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours, he was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. We might say he was distant and now he's close again. So here's the older brother, and the older brother is he's angry, right? He's angry at the closeness, like the immediate closeness that the younger son gets. And so what does he do? He plays a little game. Some of us play this game sometimes. It's called comparison. He likes to play this game. And here's what it goes like. It sort of goes like this. Look at how I've acted. Look at how I've behaved. And let's compare it to what they did. We shouldn't get equal things here. They don't deserve it. They've messed up. Look at the mess of their life. When you compare it, it shouldn't be equal. And so he's literally going, look at his decisions and look at my decisions. I obviously deserve the party, not the person who made poor decisions. Comparison. We look at someone else's sin, and then we look at our own, and we quickly make a judgment of who is better, who deserves the party. We need to make an observation here. Although the older son has been with the father like this whole time that the younger son was gone, this is so important. He's nothing like the father. The younger son was in a distant country, squandering everything. Here's the older son, spending all the years, right? All the years with the father, all these years of close. But when we look at his heart and the overflow of what's on the inside, what do we find? We find someone filled with criticism, not compassion. We find someone filled with bitterness, not joy. We find someone filled with jealousy and not generosity. He spent all of these years slaving away, doing what's right, but all the while, the net result is he is nothing like the Father. The Father responds with compassion and generosity and celebration, and this isn't who the older son is. And here's what we learn. It's possible, and this should scare us. It's possible to be close and not be close. It's possible to look the part and be far apart. It's possible to dress the part. It's possible to sound close, to on the outside behave and talk close and not be close. I mean, everything in your life, everything externally could be changing and looking better and closer, but internally, there's a problem. There's a problem. Perhaps you're at a distance. And the distance that you have isn't an external problem. You're in all the right places at all the right times. You know, you're every morning in the Bible, like whatever. But what's wrong is in here. And that's where the distance is. And the problem is, and this is why this is so important to talk about, it's so hard to detect. It's so hard to see in yourself. Maybe this is your problem. Maybe this is my problem. And like I said, this is the pervasive problem throughout human history. It's people who think they are close, but actually, they're distant. They think they're in the right, that they're right, that they're fighting God's fight, that they're representing the Father's good wishes, but in actuality, they're not. So let me ask a question. Are you close or distant? Are you externally close? And are you internally close? Are you becoming more like the Father because of everything you do out here is impacting who you are in here? I like what Isaiah says in chapter 29, verse 13. He talks about the problem. He says, they come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. And there is this internal disillusionment that creates distance, and often we're not even aware of it. And here's what it's called. It's called self-righteousness. It's called self-righteousness. And it's pervasive. And it's dangerous. And it's trying to take you over without you even knowing it. It's trying to infiltrate your operating system. It's trying to recode what you call Christianity. And the truth is, we have no idea. What is self-righteousness? And as we talk this morning, I want you to ask yourself the question, do I have this problem? Has it entered my walls and my heart? And if I do have this problem, why is it such a big deal? How do I move on from this? How do I get rid of this? What do I do if this actually is a problem that I have? And so Jesus unpacks kind of the depth of the problem of self-righteousness for us, and he's actually talking to the same audience that he gives the story of the prodigal son to, the religious leaders. And he obviously sees some self-righteousness in them. And so in Luke chapter 18, verse 9, we'll read a few verses here. Here is what he says. To some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. So if we're all wondering who this parable is for, Jesus tells us pretty plainly, it's the people who are confident. What does this word mean? This word means, and can be translated like in the NASB translation of the Bible, they trusted in, or they're persuaded by, or they're convinced by. Convinced by what? Your own right behaviors. Your own, righteousness. That's what self-righteousness is. And interesting, the word that's used here for confident is the word patho, which, oh, by the way, is a goddess of ancient Greece. And it's the goddess of persuasion and seduction. So in some ways, self-righteousness is a little bit of a self-inflicted idolatry where we are so persuaded by our own behaviors and our own thoughts and our own things, and as it follows. Self-righteousness may be more dangerous than self-gratification. I mean, you be the judge. The younger son was all into self-gratification. The older son is self-righteous. Which one's worse? They're both dangerous, but maybe, because of the collective cost of self-righteousness, it might be more dangerous. And so what we're going to do is we're going to unpack 4 ways that self-righteousness is dangerous. And I just want to say right off the bat, the reason why this should be important to you is because if you are self-righteous, there's distance. And you might not even know it. You have distance between you and God. And so it's important for us to unpack this. And the first thing, we sort of hovered around this a little bit, but why self-righteousness is dangerous is because it's disguised. It's disguised as righteousness. That's why it's so dangerous. It looks legit. It looks right. It looks convincing. It's hard to spot from the outside. It's almost natural. And sometimes people cheer it on, It's like, all right, this is good. This is what we want. But Jesus tells us that you can recognize something as self-righteousness when it produces a symptom. Did you catch it? He was confident in his own, behaviors, and he looked down on others. That's what makes this self-righteousness. What does it mean to look down on others in this context? Well, basically, he's exalting himself, the person that we're about to read about, and others, as a result, should be at a distance. In fact, because a person is more confident in themselves, others should be at a distance, and we should probably cast these people out so that they don't get in my space and ruin what I've got going on here. And so this is a pervasive problem, and it's dangerous. How is it more dangerous? Well, Jesus tells us a story. Verse 10, 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One, a Pharisee, a religious leader, right behaviors. Everyone would have looked at this person as they're close to God. Look at how they keep the rules. Look at how well they are. They never miss a Saturday at synagogue or whatever. Everybody would just know that these people are righteous. And the other, a tax collector. On the contrary, here's someone who cheats people. Here's someone who's got some problems. Here's someone who isn't for the cause of Jerusalem and Judaism. They're actually sort of networking with Rome a little bit, and they have, some things going on here. So here's the 2 characters. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast not just once a week, twice a week, and I give 1/10 of all I get. Not just, the 10th of all of my income, but even the small little arbitrary things I'm faithful in giving out of that. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you, Jesus says, that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. Went home closer to God than the other man. For all those who exalt themselves, Jesus says, will be humbled. And those who humble themselves, Jesus promises, will be exalted. Will be exalted. And what we have to notice here is this behavior of self-righteousness exalts itself. And they're so convinced that they're close. But in actuality, they might be distant. They think they're justified. We think we're justified and right before God. But in actuality, Jesus is saying, with this story, that may not be the case. Self-righteousness, let me give you a definition. Self-righteousness is a confidence that there is something that you do or that I do that makes you better or closer than someone next to you. That's self-righteousness. And it forms a basis of what you do from here on out. That's what self-righteousness is. And Jesus is telling us the story. He's sort of exaggerating this scene a little bit because he's trying to help us see the covert attitudes that we carry around with us and that we're so blind from being able to see. Self-righteousness is dangerous because it's disguised. And what does it do? It displaces the gospel of grace, the good news of grace. This is what self-righteousness looks at. So if you have self-righteousness in you, this is what you do. You think this all the time. Me compared to you. Me compared to you. Me compared to them. This is how you're judging your distance between you and God. You're looking at your behaviors, your actions, your values, and because yours are so much better than theirs, so much holier than theirs, you're lapping the field, and because you're lapping the field in all of your disciplines and all of your right actions, and however you want to define that, you're getting closer to God. You're closer than the tax collector. You're closer than the sinner. You're closer than the robber, however you want to define that. And so now your basis for your right standing with God has changed. It is no longer the cross. What is it? Well, it's not the cross. The cross is, I'm a sinner who comes close to God only through His grace. And that grace was given to me as an undeserved gift. I couldn't earn it. I don't deserve it. But yet, I have it. That's how I get close to God. What we do when we become self-righteous and that becomes a kind of a center for our functioning, we install a new system of behaviors that creates distance between us and others, and that's how we feel close to God. We set all these, arbitrary things up. And some of us are more meticulous about it, but some of us don't even realize we're doing it. But we do this so that we can feel more moral, more righteous, more progressive, and closer than someone else. And that's where our basis for comfort comes from and our basis for closeness comes from. Here's what self-righteousness looks like. Let me give you a couple of practical examples. And here's the formula. It always goes like this. I, and then you fill in the blank with a compliment about yourself, okay? I, something that you do or something that you think or something that you believe. And you compliment yourself. And they, this is the second part of the equation. I, give yourself a compliment, and they, something critical. You say something critical about them. You attack them. You label them, like whatever you do. This is what self-righteousness is. Let me give you some examples. I go to church every Sunday, and they only come once a month. Or they watch online. Can you believe it? I discipline myself to read my Bible and they waste their time. What are they doing? I understand theology so well, and they're not deeply formed disciples like me. I'm sexually pure, and they're immoral. Look at what they're doing. I understand the key issues of faith and government, and I vote accordingly, and they're so misled. Can you believe them? They think that. I'm so tolerant of others' views, and they are so narrow-minded. See, this goes both ways. I homeschool, and they send to public school. Can you believe that? Or I send to public school. Don't they know they're ruining their kids by homeschooling them? It's just such a position of self-righteousness. Look. I serve at church, and they don't. Look, I give financially, and they just, what are they doing? Buying Starbucks every day? Like, why can't they give? I don't understand it. Look, I behave a certain way, and they obviously aren't as advanced or as close as I am. See, this is pervasive. It just happens and we don't even notice it. And it actually kind of sounds sort of right. But when we look deeper, what are we doing? We're basing the justification of closeness with God on something other than the grace of Jesus. And you don't get close to God based on your behavior. You get close to God based on his behavior on the cross and how that made a way for you and how that made a way for me. And that's why self-righteousness is so dangerous, because it displaces the gospel of grace. The third way self-righteousness is dangerous is that it downplays personal sin. It downplays personal sin. Because I'm so further ahead than them, I have more right views, I behave better, I believe better. This is what happens, and this is so dangerous. Please pay attention. Therefore, because I'm better, I think better, I've got it all figured out, I'm justified to act, think, treat, tweet, or feel a certain way about others. Because after all, I know the right way, and now I can just sort of say whatever I want. And not only does it downplay your personal sin, but it almost justifies, this is so scary, hurtful and harmful and ungodly behaviors. It almost gives us a sense of agency that whatever we say or whatever we do, God is with us and approves of what we're doing, even if it's hurtful to others. So dangerous. And Jesus is teaching us through the story that if we are aware of our internal sin rather than downplaying it, and we have sorrow about that, like the tax collector, and when we see our actual distance isn't between us and them, but it's between us and God, something happens in us. Something's available to us. Even if we're a mess externally, even if we're trying to sort out what's right externally, even if others can look at us and point at us and go, wow, they're far from God, Jesus says if there's something inside that's humble, if there's something that recognizes the distance between yourself and God rather than someone else, there is something powerful that happens. We get close, we become justified, and we receive mercy. Do you think you are close? And this is so dangerous because the more distance we create from our past, obvious, sinful condition, the closer we get to a different and more dangerous condition. Self-righteousness. And it's impossible, right? I mean, think about this. It's impossible to receive grace when you downplay how much you need it. Like, you don't even ask for how much you need because you think you're good. And this is maybe the most hard part of this whole thing and why self-righteousness is so dangerous, because it makes it difficult for people to be close to God. You want to know what Jesus was passionate about? Helping people get close to God. And when we have self-righteousness as our basis for judging, self-righteous people think they're close, and they don't see their need for grace, and therefore it's difficult for them to get close to God. And a sinner, we can use that category, right? Pick any sin. You can't get close because those who think you are distant, well, they want to keep you there. And so no one gets close to God. And it's a problem. So James, the brother of Jesus, stands up to advise the church. All of these outsiders were coming into the church, and it was causing problems with people who grew up Jewish, and here come all these Gentiles, and they don't practice all these to-dos, And so there's a problem. What do we do? How do we progress? How do we intermix? How do we figure this out? And here's what James says in Acts 15:19. He says, "It is my judgment, therefore, that we should not make it difficult." This is a big council in Jerusalem, and it was going to change the way the church moved going forward. "That we should not make it difficult for Gentiles who are turning to God." What is he saying? We cannot be self-righteous. We purport the gospel of grace. We're going to make the basis of inclusion into the church, how we define what is close to God, we're going to make that grace, not performance. We're going to make our basis for inclusion a heart of compassion, not another generation of critics. The cross is enough. The cross is enough. If you want to follow Christ, if you want to be a part of our churches, you have to accept the cross. You don't have to adopt a certain politic. You don't have to adopt a certain scientific theory. You don't have to add a list of behaviors. The cross is what brings you close to God and nothing else. And such an important decision. After all, that's how you got in. Not because you behaved your way, but because God made an exception. We can't make it difficult for people who are turning to God with our own self-righteousness. And what's more alarming is it makes it difficult for you on top of all of that. And so James and the rest of the New Testament writers go, who are we to judge who gets to be close or distant? Only the gospel of grace gets to do that. See, self-righteousness is dangerous because it replaces the gospel with something else. And it creates distance. So what do we need to do? We need to recognize the disguise of self-righteousness. We need to recognize the disguise of self-righteousness. How do I do that? How do I recognize what's so pervasive in me? And what do I do instead? And so what I want to give you is I want to give you 5 techniques to help you fight the self-righteousness that sometimes hides in you. The first one is this: redefine spiritual maturity. Redefine what it looks like to be close to God. Listen, closeness to God is not closeness because you act a certain way. It's more of an awareness of our distance. Think about this. Paul, did anybody believe and follow Jesus better than the Apostle Paul? And as he progresses in his ministry, he begins to label himself, I'm the chief of all sinners. So what's happening here? Well, think about this. You've drove to downtown St. Louis several times, and as you get close to downtown St. Louis, you see something in the skyline, don't you? You see the arch, the Gateway Arch. And it looks, like it's a decent size. And as you're getting closer to it, what happens? It gets bigger. It gets bigger. And if you were to go park and get out of your car and go walk up to the arch and to look up, you would just be so overwhelmed by how much bigger it is than when you're on the outskirts of the city. What is spiritual maturity? The closer you get to God, the more you become aware of His holiness and how far you are from a holy God. That's what spiritual maturity is. The longer you walk with Jesus, the longer you follow Jesus, what does it do? It produces a deep awareness of your sinfulness. I need grace every day. I thought yesterday I needed it, but now that I'm closer, oh my goodness, more than I thought, I need the grace of God in my life. And that position of grace and that position of humility, that's what motivates us to actually behave better. Not a perception that we're close, but actually a realization that we're far. The second technique you need is you need a new grading system. You need a new grading system. When you're grading yourself or others, don't use A, B, C, D, or F. That person gets a B in following Jesus. I get a C. No. You're going to give a G for grace because that's the grade that God uses. And so we've got to get out of this. Listen to Romans 5. It says, therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access. How do we gain access? By behaviors and following all the to-dos? No, by faith in this grace in which we now stand, and we boast in the hope of the glory of God. That is our basis. It's His grace. It's His grace. So what does that mean? That means that people with a different past, with different sins, with a different story, who vote different or view different, do you know what? If they have faith in Jesus, they're just as close as you. Because we're all dependent on the grace of Jesus. The third thing you need is don't judge. Third technique, don't judge from a distance. If you pick one of these techniques, this might be one you need to pick. So let me ask this question, just kind of playing the other side of this. As we prevent self-righteousness, which we should do, what about unrighteousness? Like, what if we open the door to everyone? Isn't that just as dangerous, right? Like, how are we going to call out sin? And so let me just say this. I didn't say don't judge. I said don't judge from a distance. In other words, don't do it inauthentically and outside of how the gospel spells it out for us. First little tip for me. Don't judge the outside world. Paul tells us this in 1 Corinthians 5. He says, who am I to judge? That's God's job. They're not even adhering to this. So what does he do? He says, let's turn it internally. So don't worry about judging the outside world. God's got that under control. The second thing is judge internally yourself first. Right? Isn't that what Jesus teaches when he says, take the log out of your eye? It's like, what if we just looked at ourselves first? And then Jesus doesn't stop there. He says, judge others with the same standard. So if you're going to judge, first of all, judge yourself. And then whatever standard you use for yourself, why don't you take that and apply it to somebody else? Oh, and by the way, if the standard is other than grace, it's not even God's standard. So you might want to think about that. And then fourthly, most importantly, judge from the context of a loving relationship. How many of your judgments on other people, other movements, politicians, friends, coworkers come from a loving relationship? See, when Paul writes the New Testament church, he has a relationship with them. He says things like, you saw how I behaved among you, how I worked, how I toiled, how I think about you and pray for you. And then he says, here's what you should change. That's how you execute a Christ-like, grace-based place of judgment. And let me just say this as clearly as I can. Social media is not the context of a close relationship. And it won't work. So maybe, just maybe, you could cultivate and work on creating relationships with people you disagree with and have real conversations with them rather than 140 characters or less and everybody's more mad. It's just not the way that we should do this. Fourth tip, offer grace to someone else. We stand close to God only because of the grace of the cross. When was the last time you celebrated instead of criticized? The father celebrated. The older son criticized. When was the last time you were curious about, I wonder what their story is? I wonder what's making them want to get their life right. I wonder what's the backstory to their situation versus condemning them. I can't believe they, got themselves into this. When was the last time you cared for a person more than you cared about convicting a person? If you struggle to think of one last time you did that, maybe you're not as close as you thought you were. The final tip I want to give you is tell yourself your own story. This may be the most important one. Every day, preach the gospel to yourself. Every day, remind yourself this and be unfiltered. I was a wretch, I used to lie. I have a sexual past. I cheated those people. I was lost. I was addicted. But then I discovered grace. Then I discovered a heavenly Father who was overflowing in compassion. And I was transformed. It has changed me every day. If you wake up and for 3 minutes you remind yourself that you're a wretch, because you were, and only because of Jesus and what he's done are you anywhere standing close to God, it will transform the way you see others as it transforms the way you see yourself. This is what the Pharisee should have prayed. It's in Psalm 139, verse 23. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me and lead me in the way everlasting. That's the prayer that you pray. Not that, look at what I've done, I'm better, all of that. Not that. Me, the word me is said 6 times in this section. Know me, test me, teach me to see myself first, where my actual distance is. I understand, God, that as I ask you, this is how I walk with you, the awareness of where I'm truly at with you, that's how I get close. How are my thoughts, God? How are my tendencies? Is there anybody that I have a heart problem with that I just have a disgusting view of? Show me that. Don't let me go another day tolerating that in me. It's possible, and this is so scary, it's possible to be so intimately familiar with the Scripture, but distant from the Father. It's possible to be close and look close and sound close, but inwardly be so far away. How do you get close to God again? We need to recognize the disguise of self-righteousness. In this story, I used to be the tax collector. Just me personally. I'm so disgusted at myself because now I'm definitely more the Pharisee. What happened? I've got to daily come before God and let him put his grace on me and be reminded. Look, if this entire message, you've been thinking about the other person who needs correction, you might be calling out self-righteousness, and we're all getting excited about that. But we have to be careful is that we don't create another form of self-righteousness in the process. What if we stop disguising and displacing and downplaying and making it difficult? What if we fought self-righteousness, continually exposed our internal issue? What if we did this? What if we embraced amazing grace? When you truly know the depth of grace that you need, you will treat others gracefully. You were a wretch, you were blind, you were lost, but now you see. But now you see so clearly. Let's pray together. Thank you, God, that you are a God of grace. You don't deal with me as I deserve. You offer me love and unconditional forgiveness and unlimited forgiveness. Help me internally to never lose my awareness of my distance with you. Thank you for bringing me close. And in the process, I surrender my self-righteousness today. I confess my self-righteousness before you. And instead, we're going to look at your amazing grace and we're going to worship and we're going to say, thank you, God. Would you just carefully and intentionally search us now over the next few minutes? We don't want to walk out of this service carrying an ounce of self-righteousness. And so have your way. Come here. Show us what's different and help us to walk in the gospel of grace. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, would you stand and let's sing together?